بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Inshallah, in today's class we are going to begin a brand new chapter, which is the chapter of Salah. And as you will find in almost all books of fiqh, including many of the major hadith collections, the chapter or the discussion of prayer will oftentimes begin with the times of prayer, mawaqit as-salah. So one of the prerequisites to pray is that you have tahara, which is why the entire first chapter of fiqh deals with tahara. The second prerequisite for the prayer is you have to know when the times of prayer come. A corollary to that is you need to know the direction of prayer, so you have to be able to determine the qibla, and then you pray. So in this book, in this primer, he will begin with the times of the 5 daily prayers, and of course this entire lecture will be dedicated just to that. The times of the prayer are taken from the various hadith that we find when the Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam came to teach the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam the different times of prayers, and based on some of the interpretations of the mujtahids of those hadith, there are slightly different interpretations for the times. What concerns us is the start time for the prayer, the end time for the prayer. Within each time, there are different sub-times. We'll make reference to those. But the most important thing is to know when the prayer starts and when the prayer ends. And then secondly, there will be a best time to pray. You are free to choose this time, a makruh time to pray, a haram time to pray, so on and so forth. Why do we need to know the beginning and the end times? Because if we pray during the right time, then this prayer is accepted, it's ada, we have completed it. If we pray outside of this time, then the prayer is qada, it's a make-up prayer. These are, of course, usuli terms, but in this case it's very important that we learn. Some of the prayers have more narrow times, like Maghrib, for example, is the narrowest of the times. And then some prayers, we will need to learn a little bit about how the sun moves, particularly with Isha prayer and with Fajr prayer. As a corollary to that, we will make some mention to what happens when there is no proper sunset, or the day is very long, or the day is very short, as can be experienced in very northernly latitude countries. I mean, we're not going to spend too much time on that, but I'll make a quick reference to that when we talk specifically about the Isha prayer and the Fajr prayer, because that will impact not only the prayer times, but it will also impact the fasting times, inshallah. And this will be basically what we will discuss in this lecture, inshallah. Let us begin by reading the Arabic of the Matn of Abi Shuja. قال رضي الله عنه ونفعنا بعلومه في الدارين آمين. كتاب الصلاة. مواقيت الصلاة. الصلاة المفروضة 5: الظهر، وأول وقتها زوال الشمس، وآخره إذا صار ظل كل شيء مثله بعد ظل الزوال. والعصر، وأول وقتها الزيادة على الظل المثلي، وآخره في الاختيار إلى الظل المثلين، وفي الجواز إلى غروب الشمس. والمغرب ووقتها واحد، وهو غروب الشمس، وبمقدار ما يؤذن ويتوضأ ويستر العورة ويقيم الصلاة ويصلي 5 ركعات، وآخره إذا غاب الشفق الأحمر. والعشاء، وأول وقتها إذا غاب الشفق الأحمر، وآخره في الاختيار إلى ثلث الليل، وفي الجواز إلى طلوع الفجر الثاني. والصبح، وأول وقتها طلوع الفجر الثاني، وآخره في الاختيار إلى الإسفرار، وفي الجواز إلى طلوع الشمس. So, we will talk about the greater adilla. Of course, the prayer, the establishment of the prayer, Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran, وَأَقِمُ الصَّلَاةِ. So this is the main thrust of the prayer, plus the hadith of Jibreel alayhi salam, in which the Prophet ﷺ defined Islam as the Shahada and then the 5 prayers. There's also the other hadith that's narrated in Bukhari, Bunya al-Islam ala khams, etc. sorry, that hadith is in Bukhari, Buni al-Islam ala khams, Shahadatu la ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, wa iqam as-salat, etc. until the end of the prayer, until the end of the hadith. Okay, so we know that establishing the prayer is important. I am going to just have the hashia next to me because there are some references that I want to make to the hashia. One common misconception that people have is that prayer did not exist in Islam until the Isra and Ma'raj, but that's not true. There is evidence of prayer from the very beginning of the Risala, and the prayer was 2 and 2 and 2, like 2 rakahs and 2 rakahs. It is the 5 daily prayers that comes from the event of the Isra and Ma'raj, which is said to have taken place before the Hijrah by 1 year, and in one opinion before the Hijrah by 6 months. So in the discussion that we are about to have, we are talking about the 5 daily prayers as have come from the Isra and Ma'raj. Of course, we know that the prayers originally were 50. And the Prophet ﷺ kept going back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until they were reduced to 5. So one of the unique features about our prayer is that the 5 daily prayers that we have, we are given the reward of those original 50. Now, one of the reasons he begins by talking about Salat al-Dhuhr is that in the hadith of Jibreel alayhi salam teaching the Prophet ﷺ the prayer, he begins with Salat al-Dhuhr. So that's why he begins with Salat al-Dhuhr and then he ends with Salat al-Fajr, having iqtida'an bil hadith, just to follow the order that is laid out by the hadith. Okay, so those are just some introductory things that I wanted to mention to you. Let us read the translation and then let us go over it line by line. There are 5 obligatory daily prayers. The time for the noon prayer begins with the sun passing its zenith. It ends with the length of an object's shadow minus its shadow at the zenith. Sorry, let me say that again. The time of the noon prayer begins with the sun passing its zenith. It ends when the length of an object's shadow minus its shadow of the zenith is the same as its height. The time for the mid-afternoon prayer begins with the length of an object's shadow minus its shadow at the zenith is greater than the object's height. Its preferred time ends when an object's shadow is twice its height. Its permissible time extends until sunset. The time of the sunset prayer is a single time. It begins with when the sun sets completely and lasts long enough for one to perform the call to prayer, the adhan, make ablution, cover what must be covered to perform the prayer, perform the call to commence prayer, the iqamah, and pray 5 rak'at, meaning the maghrib and then the 2 sunnah afterwards. The time for the night prayer, for Isha prayer, begins when the red in the sky disappears. Its preferred time extends until the end of the first third of the night. Its permissible time extends until the beginning of true dawn. The time of dawn prayer begins at true dawn. Its preferred time extends until a yellow glow appears on the horizon, and its permissible time extends to the rising of the sun. Okay, so we have to demonstrate all of this so it makes sense. The first thing that he says is that there are 5 obligatory daily prayers, and the reason we phrase it that way is to accommodate in situations in which the times of the day and the night have been messed up. The greatest example we have is the hadith of the Dajjal. When the Dajjal comes, one of his days will be like 40 days. So the Prophet ﷺ said, is it enough to pray 5 prayers? He's like, La uqduru lahu qadra. You have to count and estimate and allot the times for those for that situation. Meaning, what the fuqaha take from that, other than the literal meaning in the time of the Dajjal, that there could be a situation in which the sun rising and setting and the moon rising and setting is all messed up. Like we find some places very up north and very down south of the globe where it's light 6 months of the year and dark 6 months of the year. So what do you do in those situations? Well, we know that there are 5 obligatory daily prayers, meaning for each allotted 24-hour times, even if we are not able to determine them by the movement of the sun and the moon and etc., we have to calculate that every 24-hour slot, we have those 5 daily prayers. So, of course, for the vast majority of us, we will not experience that, but that's why it's phrased this way, because it's important to remember that what we are about to discuss is the general way we determine the starting times and the ending times of the prayer. But that doesn't mean if those things do not happen, then there is no prayer. The prayer has to happen irrespective of these astronomical or astrological rather phenomena. The rising of the sun, the movement, the shadow, etc. All the things that we are going to discuss. Yes, Allah has established these as asbab, as causes for the prayer. But in their absence, we still have the obligation to pray. وَأَقِمِ الصَّلَاةِ. And then the hadith of the Dajjal guides us that in some scenarios we will have to start to measure and to allot the times for it. And I wanted to get you the reference for the hadith of the Dajjal. It is in Muslim. That is the hadith when the Prophet ﷺ said, "Iqduru lahu qadra." Okay. So as I said, he's going to begin with Salat al-Dhuhr for obvious reasons. So let us begin with that. When does Dhuhr prayer start? It begins when the sun passes its zenith. The zenith is when the sun is at the very top of the sky. So if I'm standing like this and the sun is right on top of me, this is east and this is west. The sun rises in the east, rises like this and sets in the west. The minute the sun is in the middle of the sky, this is called the zenith, az-zawal. When it starts to move towards the west, right after it reaches the peak, it starts to move to the west. That's called the zawal. So when does Dhuhr time start? At that movement. And Dhuhr time ends when the object, let's say I'm the object I'm standing, or I put a stick on the ground, the shadow of that object is equal to that object's length minus the shadow that exists at the time of zawal. Meaning, if I have this object and I put it on the ground, at the time of the zawal, right when the sun is at the top of the sky, right before Salat al-Dhuhr, there's a little bit of a shadow. This little shadow is of different lengths, different times of the year, which is why the professional people that there used to be a job that people that determine the beginning and the ends of the prayer times, they would know the size of those shadows. That's the zawal shadow. So when the sun starts to move to the west, and this object's shadow is its same length minus that little shadow that existed at the zawal time, that's the beginning time and the end time for Salat al-Dhuhr. That's how we determine the Dhuhr prayer. Now, the zawal time is something that's also determined when they see that the movement of the shadow starts moving a certain way, away from the object. Either the shadow moves towards the east or to the west. It depends what part of the earth hemisphere you are, winter or summer, north or south, east, west, etc. The people that are experts in these matters are the people that have they have prayer schedules. We have over 1,000 years of prayer schedules in which all of this has been established. So remember, as we have this discussion, these were professional people that took care of that. So when the object's shadow is the same size as that object minus whatever little part existed of shadow at the time of the zawal, that's the end time of Salat al-Dhuhr. How about Asr prayer? Asr prayer begins when the length of an object's shadow minus its shadow at the zenith, that little shadow at the zawal, is greater than the object's height. So the minute we increase more than the size of the object, that's the beginning of Salat al-Asr. Its preferred time ends when an object's shadow is twice its height. So when that shadow is twice the length, or twice the height rather, of that object minus what is at zawal, that is the preferred time. And then its permissible time extends until sunset. I'm going to go through the text and then we're going to go back in the next clip and we're going to talk about the different subtimes. So let's just get the beginning and the end times so we're clear about everything. So Dhuhr time ends, Asr time begins. The minute Asr time ends, the next prayer will start, which is Maghrib. What is the definition of the Maghrib prayer? Maghrib prayer is a single time. Now, what he is about to say about the Maghrib prayer, this is the new madhab of Imam Shafi'i, not the old school. This is one of those rare circumstances where the mu'tamid opinion in the madhab is the old opinion of Imam Shafi'i, not the new, as has been offered to us by Imam Nawawi. So we're going to read it out of respect the way it is, and then I'm going to let you know what the mu'tamid opinion of the madhab is. So the time for the sunset prayer, the Maghrib prayer, is a single time. What does it mean? It means that it has to be all done within what he's about to say. The minute the sun sets completely. The sun sets completely means the disk of the sun, if you're at the bottom of your screen, if the sun is setting, the minute this part, the top part of the disk, descends, boom, that's Maghrib time. Which means at Maghrib time, right at Maghrib time, it's still light outside because the sun is right there below the horizon, so it's still emitting light. But it starts to get darker and darker and darker pretty fast. But the minute the disk descends, boom, that's Maghrib time. That's when it starts. That's what he means by the sun sets completely. It means the disk of the sun, it goes below the horizon, you can no longer see it. But you'll still see the rays and the red and all of that, and it'll be light for maybe up until 10 more minutes. It lasts long enough. How long? The minute it sets, how long is Maghrib according to the new position of Imam Shafi'i? It lasts long enough to make the adhan, make wudu, put on your clothes that you need to pray with, make the iqamah, and pray for 5 rakahs. The 3 rakahs of the fard of Maghrib, salam, salam, and then the 2 rakahs of sunnah. That's it. Let's say 20 to 30 minutes. That's it. That's the new position. So in the new madhab of Sayyidina Imam Shafi'i radiallahu anhu, it's a little bit strict. The old madhab, which is where the tarjih is, which is the mu'tamid opinion, is that Maghrib lasts until Isha time. So what is Isha time? The time for the night prayer begins when the red of the sky disappears. So when the disk descends like this, all throughout the horizon there'll be a strip of red. When that red disappears, there'll be a strip of white, and then after some time the white disappears and it's just black. Obviously, depending on the size of the moon, these things might differ in times. But the minute that red strip disappears and you see that white strip, that's the beginning of Isha time. Which means in the old position of Imam Shafi'i, which is where the mu'tamid is of the madhab of Imam Shafi'i, Maghrib will last until that time. So you have a lot more time to do it. The night prayer, Isha prayer, begins when the red in the sky disappears. Its preferred time ends until the first third of the night. Its permissible time extends until the beginning of true dawn. The preferable permissible time, I'll do that in the next clip for all of the prayers. Let's just finish the text as it is. So, it lasts until true dawn. Al-Fajr al-Sadiq. In the books of astronomy, we have something called Al-Fajr al-Kadhib, the false dawn, which is before the dawn comes. Now the dawn is that when the sun is rising. Before the sun rises, the sun will emit light on the horizon. So it's almost like the reverse of what you see at Maghrib and Isha, which is that you will see a little bit of light, and then the light will get stronger and stronger and stronger, and then it will get redder and redder and redder, and then the sun will rise. The false dawn is that as the sun is rising, there is a streak of white that you think this is the dawn, but then it disappears. And this is called the false dawn. Al-Fajr al-Sadiq, the true dawn, is that white remains. Now, for people that have looked into these astronomical phenomena in detail, it's almost, I have not met anyone at all who has ever seen these things with their own 2 eyes in the modern age because of the great light pollution. Maybe there are some observatories in some parts of deserts of Muslim majority countries in which there are experts that have seen them. I have not spoken to them, but the people that I have spoken to, these are things you really have to be out in the middle of nowhere where there's no artificial light to witness them. This is going to be very important because there is going to be a special way that we have to remember that there's a way that we have to calculate the end of Isha, or sorry, the beginning of Isha and the beginning of Fajr. As the sun descends, we said that this is Maghrib. And then when the red disappears and the white appears, that's Isha. The beginning of Isha, the sun is at some angle below the horizon. Each degree that the sun moves is 4 minutes. So as the sun goes down, like let's say this is the horizon, as the sun goes down like this, there's some degree between where the sun is and where the horizon is where I am. That angle, that's the angle of Isha. And that's why many calendars and many calculations have different timings for Isha, because they have different angles. This is not the venue to talk about that, but I'm explaining where this comes from. However, we all know that Isha is when the white goes away. When the red goes away, that's the beginning of Isha. But likewise with Fajr, at what angle below this horizon is the sun coming up is this phenomenon of the Al-Fajr al-Sadiq. Again, this is where the ijtihad is. Okay, so he says the time for dawn appears at true dawn, Al-Fajr al-Sadiq. Its preferred time extends until the yellow glow appears on the horizon. Its permissible time extends to the rising of the sun. So the minute the disk of the sun rises, the minute you see the round part of the disk, that's the end of Salatul Fajr. So between the sun rising and going to the zawal, that time, that's the time for the duha prayer, the sunnah of duha prayer. Other than that gap, from dhuhr all the way till fajr, it's one leads into the other. So the mu'tamad in our madhab is that dhuhr time goes from the beginning of dhuhr as defined till the end of dhuhr. Asr is at that time until the end of Asr. Maghrib is at that time until Isha. Isha is that time all the way until Fajr. So almost the entire 24-hour cycle minus the time in which the sun is rising. As the sun is coming up, that's a haram time to pray. You have to wait till the sun is 2 spears above the length above the horizon. At that time, then you can pray your duha prayer all the way up until, which is a sunnah prayer, all the way up until before the zawal of Salat al-Dhuhr. And then you begin the cycle. Okay, so hopefully we kind of got some ideas of what this text means. Inshallah, in the next clip, what I'm going to do is we're going to go into the hashiyah a little bit more detail. We're going to go over those prayer times again, but I want us to learn the sub parts of the different prayer times. And then specifically, we're going to talk about Isha prayer and Fajr in some situations that we might, people living in certain circumstances might have to follow another way of determining those prayer times because they won't observe some of these natural phenomena that have been described in the books. Okay, so let's go back to Salat al-Dhuhr. We have 6 sub-times in Salat al-Dhuhr. The first time is the preferred time, and that is when the time comes in and one is able to pray it. That is waqt al-fadila. This is the preferred time. And then there's waqt al-ikhtiyar, the time in which you are able to choose when to pray it. And that's after the first time ends, which is at the beginning of its time. And that lasts up until about the halfway time inside Salat al-Dhuhr. And then after that, you have a permissible time that is makruh, that is disliked. After that, you have a time where it is permissible to pray, but it is not makruh, which means is that it's at the very end of the time and you can squeeze all of the furud that you need to do inside it. After that would be the haram time to pray, in which you have left the prayer till the very end. that there's not enough time to pray the full prayer, even if the full prayer will count as ada. Meaning that if you have one rak'ah, if you make one full rak'ah, as the Prophet ﷺ taught us in the hadith, if you pray one full rak'ah inside the time and the other rak'at outside of the time, that prayer still counts as ada. It's not a qada prayer. But this would be, if you delay it on purpose till that time, this is called waqtul hurma. This is the haram time to do it. The fifth time is waqtul darura, the time of necessity. And this is at the end of the time of the prayer. In which case you only have time to do like a takbirah and begin the prayer because there's not enough time left. And it's darura because it necessitates that at that time you have to pray it, or else you're going to miss the whole thing altogether. And then the last time for the prayer, what time of prayer for Salat al-Dhuhr is called waqt al-udhr. It's an excused time, meaning that you can delay Dhuhr prayer until Asr prayer because it is one of the prayers that you can combine. So that's one of the unique things with Salat al-Dhuhr. Now, when he talks about Asr prayer in the text itself, he did mention some of the subgroups. Let's go over those. He has 5 prayers, 5 times. So the first time is Waqtul Fadila. And this is it's preferred to always pray everything in the beginning, and that's when all the reward is. And then the second time is the chosen ikhtiyar. You have the option to pray it during that time, like the Dhuhr prayer. And I think in the text he even said for Asr prayer, its preferred time extends to the object's shadow is twice its length. The third time is Waqt al-Jawaz, the permissible time, which would be after that. The fourth time is Waqt al-Jawaz bila karaha, it's permissible time without it being makruh, which is going to be a similar discussion to what we said about Dhuhr. And then the last time is its haram time. Which is leaving it till the very end and not having enough time to pray the whole thing. Now, when it comes to Maghrib prayer, when it comes to Asr prayer, we said that there is going to be a difference in which opinion of Imam Shafi'i we take. In this case, it's one of those few circumstances in which we take the old school's opinion over the new school's opinion, even though what Abi Shuja wrote, radiallahu anhu, is the new school's opinion, which is that its prayer is enough. It's from the beginning of Maghrib prayer until the beginning of Isha prayer. And in that case, within that tight time, even though it's tight, you will still have those subgroups of preferable, permissible, makruh, and haram. And then the same comes with the Isha prayer. Even in the text, he says, its preferred time extends until the end of the first third of the night. Well, how do you know what the third of the night is? The night begins with Maghrib. So night begins with Maghrib all the way till Fajr time. So you count the hours from Maghrib time all the way to Fajr time. Those are the hours of the night. So therefore you know what the first third or first half or first or second third of the night, that's how you determine what it is. So we have Al-Nahar, the day starts with Fajr and ends with Maghrib. Al-Layl starts with Maghrib and goes all the way up into Fajr time, the following day. So all of the hadith about the third and the last third and the second third, that's how you determine what those things are. The bottom line with these sub times is that it's all permissible to pray at any time. If you pray at any time, as long as one rak'ah is made in the prayer time, that counts as adat. These subgroups are to encourage us in a devotional way, that it's preferable to pray as soon as possible and not to delay it without excuse. That's what he's talking about. Especially when we talk about the times in which it is makruh to pray, or makruh with hurma, or the haram time, or the daruri time. That means is to wait till the very end and barely have enough time to finish the prayer. Okay, another sub thing that I want to talk about before we wrap up is with Isha. We said that the Isha begins when the red disappears. However, there are some places in the world in which that red never disappears. So from our point of view, we would say that there are parts of the world in which the sun never truly sets. That's what that means. So what happens if the sun never truly sets? How do you determine when Isha is? The standard position in the Shafi'i madhab is that you find a land that is nearest to you in which the sun sets properly, and that's when you will determine when the Isha prayer is. So you would, now it's made easy, we can sort of go online and figure that out. Now what happens if we live in an area in which it's daylight all the time, or it's sunset all the time? As we said in the very beginning, اقدروا له قدرا. We have to determine and allot the times. There are two ways of doing that. One way is, let's say I live in an area in which it's dark for 6 months of the year. Okay, that means the rising and the setting of the sun and the moon and all of that is not valid. It's broken. I'm going to go to the nearest place physically to where I am in which there are the 5 daily prayers, and those are the times of the prayers that I'm going to start. So maybe Fajr is at 2 in the morning, and Dhuhr is at, 10:30. I'm just making it up, something like that. Then those are the times where I'm going to pray. Those are also going to be the times that I'm going to fast if I find myself in Ramadan, etc. That's one way of doing it, which is what you will find in the standard books of fiqh. Another way of doing it, which is a modern fiqh position, is that we will use the hours of prayer in Mecca. At this time, Allah Ta'ala refers to Mecca as al-Qura, the mother of all cities, and therefore whatever the times of let's say I'm in this land for the next 4 or 5 months, there's no daylight, it's only darkness. I'm going to look at when Fajr is at Mecca. Now, that's when my Fajr time will start, then my Dhuhr, then my Asr, then my Maghrib, then my Isha. And then all of the rules would then apply of the preferred time, the ikhtiyari time, the makruh time, the daruri time, the haram time, etc. So on and so forth. I would do that for both my prayers, and I would do that for my fasting if that was one of the situation. As far as what happens when the fasting time is too long, we'll delay that discussion until we get into the section of fasting, inshaAllah. And I hope this is clear. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. So, alhamdulillah, we finally have begun a new chapter in the fiqh book, the book of prayer. And this was a very involved chapter, even though it was not that, we didn't discuss that long, but we discussed the times of the prayer. So, when we discussed the times of the prayer, we learned the beginning and end times of the prayer and the astronomical phenomena surrounded that Allah Ta'ala has established as causes for the beginning and end times. These are asbab. And in the science of usul al-fiqh, we call this al-ahkam al-wada'iyya. These are the rulings that Allah Ta'ala has established. He has made the movement of the sun in certain ways to be causes for the beginning and end times of the different prayers. So we went through the 5 daily prayers, starting with Dhuhr, going all the way till Fajr. We talked about how, specifically with the Maghrib prayer, this is one of the rare circumstances in the Shafi'i madhab that we follow the old opinion of Imam Shafi'i, not the new opinion. When we talked about the next layer of discussion, is we talked about the different times of prayer for Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib and Isha and Fajr. All 5 prayers will have the same 5 or 6 categories of optimal time, preferable time of choice, makruh time, time of choice without karaha, time of choice with karaha, haram time, necessity time. And those will expand and contract depending on how long each prayer, how many hours are in that allotted prayer time. Then we talked specifically a little bit more detail, another third layer about Isha and Fajr, and how the degree of the sun below the horizon is a number that a lot of the ulama of the timings will calculate to find out when Isha starts, and the degree of the sun before it rises in the horizon to be the determining of Salatul Fajr. And there are in the past, we have over 1,000 years of prayer schedules throughout the Muslim world in which the ulama have observed these things and cataloged their findings. So when you get into the details of the prayer times, this is one of the aspects of the fiqh that you will need to learn. We also talked about how some of these astronomical phenomena are sometimes almost impossible to see in our normal areas of living, that you really have to go out to remote areas in which there is no artificial light to be able to determine them and to see them. And then lastly, we shed a little bit of light talking about what happens in which you are in an area in which the sun technically doesn't set because the red that's around the horizon doesn't disappear. And we talked about the standard fiqhi position in our madhab is that you will follow the neighboring city that has proper timings. And another modern opinion is that we can use the timings of Mecca to determine, especially if we live in an area in which there's no sunlight at all, or there's only sunlight and no sunset. And we also mentioned that this will have implications in fasting, which we will delay to when we talk about the fasting, inshallah. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam.